A warning to our viewers. What you're about to watch is a true story. The following program contains content that some viewers may find disturbing. Viewer discretion is strongly advised.
The levels of brutality were wholly exceptional, and Shakira's suffering was extreme. As I have said, it was proved beyond doubt at trial that this was a sadistic murder.
This is Shakira Spencer, here in her early 30s, a mother of two. This was Shakira after the campaign of abuse. She was tortured, enslaved, starved and forced into sex work, all at the hands of those she considered her friends. Ashana Studholme, who was pregnant during the abuse and gave birth in prison. Her former boyfriend, Sean Pendlebury, and their friend, Lisa Richardson. Together, they killed her and left her body beaten and burnt by a blowtorch to decompose in her child's bedroom.
September 25th, 2022, Ealing, West London. A quiet Sunday morning in what should have been just another ordinary residential block. Mrs. Jenkins had been trying to ignore it for days. That smell. Sweet, sickening, wrong. It seemed to seep through the walls, growing stronger each passing hour, emanating from the flat next door where her neighbor, Shakira, lived. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared her for what she discovered that morning when she stepped into the hallway. Hundreds of maggots, crawling like a living, writhing carpet from beneath Shakira's front door, spilling into the corridor, moving with purpose toward the light. Mrs. Jenkins' scream echoed through the building as she fumbled for her phone, her hands shaking as she dialed emergency services. Within minutes, police would arrive at that unassuming address in West London. What they found inside would shake even the most seasoned investigators to their core. Behind that door lay evidence of one of the most sadistic and prolonged torture cases in recent British criminal history. A campaign of cruelty so systematic, so deliberately evil, that it would take a jury nearly 18 hours to process the full horror of what had transpired. This is the story of Shakira Spencer, a 35-year-old mother of two who, in the space of 18 months, would be systematically tortured, starved, and beaten to death by the very people she had welcomed into her home as friends. By September 2022, they would leave her so broken, so destroyed, that when neighbors finally called police about something crawling from beneath her door, even seasoned investigators would struggle to comprehend what human beings had done to another human being. Welcome to the Shadow Files crime series. Tonight's case will shake you to your core. Take a moment to hit subscribe, drop a like, and please let us know where you're watching from. And now, we begin. West London, 2021 to 2022. Britain was in the grip of what economists would later call the worst cost of living crisis in a generation. Inflation soared from under 1% in early 2021 to a staggering 11.1% by October 2022, a 41-year high. For families in working-class boroughs like Ealing, this wasn't just numbers on a government spreadsheet. This was catastrophe. Energy bills had risen by 54% since April 2022, with gas prices surging by nearly 96%. Food prices climbed by 14.5%. Across West London, the reality was brutal. Benefit claimant numbers had exploded by 173,000 people thrust into poverty. Over 186,000 residents had been furloughed, their futures uncertain, their savings depleted. This was a time when families faced what politicians coldly termed impossible choices, heating or eating. When proud, independent people who had never asked for help found themselves queuing at food banks. When neighbors who had once checked on each other became isolated behind closed doors, struggling in silence. The crisis hit hardest those with the lowest incomes. They faced an effective inflation rate of 12.5%, while wealthier households experienced just 9.6%. In Ealing's social housing estates and converted Victorian terraces, vulnerability became visible, and predators were watching. It was in this environment of desperation and isolation that the most dangerous kind of evil thrives. The kind that wears a friendly face, that offers help to those drowning in circumstances beyond their control, the kind that preys on people like Shakira Spencer, who was about to learn that sometimes the greatest monsters are the ones who knock on your door with a smile. To understand the full tragedy of what happened in that Ealing flat, we need to know who Shakira Spencer really was. Not the emaciated, broken woman found in September 2022, but the vibrant person she had been for most of her 35 years. Born on June 13, 1987, Shakira grew up in West London as what neighbours would later describe as a lovable but vulnerable young woman. She was the devoted mother of 2 children who absolutely adored her. Those who knew her spoke of someone who was socially awkward at times, someone who presented as having learning difficulties, but whose heart was always in the right place. Despite her challenges, Shakira had managed to build an independent life for herself. She had been in a stable relationship, maintained her own flat in Ealing, and worked hard to provide for her family. In photographs from 2017, we see a completely different woman, healthy, happy, a comfortable size 16 with bright eyes and a genuine smile. This was Shakira at her best, confident enough to live on her own terms, strong enough to raise her children, resilient enough to navigate life's everyday challenges. But there was something about Shakira that would ultimately make her a target. She possessed an almost childlike trust in people, an eagerness to please that made her want to see the best in everyone she met. Neighbors noted how she would light up when someone paid attention to her, how desperately she wanted to be included, to belong, to be accepted. The Shakira Spencer that her family knew was a woman of simple but profound love. She worked diligently to support her children, taking pride in maintaining her small flat in what was supposed to be a safe, quiet neighborhood. Her world wasn't glamorous, but it was hers, built through her own determination and fierce dedication to her family. Her son's words, spoken during the trial, reveal everything. "To me, my mum was the best. She was not perfect, but she made me feel happy, safe, and loved." This was Shakira's gift, an extraordinary ability to make others feel valued and cherished. But it was precisely this beautiful quality that would mark her for destruction. Shakira's own mother, Shakira Spencer, would later provide perhaps the most chilling insight into why her daughter became a target. She always wanted to be liked, which made her keen to please people and thoughtful. However, this trait also made her vulnerable. In the wrong hands, kindness becomes currency. Generosity becomes exploitation. The desperate need to belong becomes a weapon that can be turned against you with devastating precision. Shakira Spencer's trusting nature, her eagerness to please, her deep-seated need for acceptance, these weren't character flaws. They were the very qualities that make us human. But to the predators, who were already circling, already planning, these traits made her the perfect victim, because while Shakira was searching for genuine friendship, 3 individuals were about to enter her life who saw something entirely different when they looked at her. They saw opportunity. They saw control. They saw someone they could break. In 2021, evil moved in next door to Shakira Spencer. Her name was Shakira Spencer, and at 39 years old, she had already carved a bloody path through 2 cities. Court records would later reveal a chilling pattern: 3 previous convictions for assaulting women in both Edinburgh and London, multiple shoplifting offenses, most disturbingly a caution for child neglect after a child fell from a flat roof while playing in a paddling pool, unattended under her watch. But none of this was visible to Shakira when Studholm knocked on her door that first time, wearing the mask of friendship that predators perfect. What Shakira saw was a neighbor offering companionship. What she couldn't see was a woman who Detective Chief Inspector Brian Howie would later describe in terms that chill the blood. Shakira Studholm is a cruel, manipulative, coercive individual. She seems to have a power over people and controls them. She is just a vile person. Studholm possessed something far more dangerous than physical strength. She had an almost supernatural ability to identify vulnerability and exploit it. Like a parasite seeking a host, she had surveyed the quiet Ealing neighborhood and selected Shakira with the calculating precision of a predator who understood exactly what she was hunting for. Someone trusting, someone lonely, someone desperate to belong. The timing was no coincidence. Studholm had recently established herself in the area, and she needed someone to control, someone to dominate, someone to serve as her personal slave. In Shakira Spencer, socially awkward, eager to please, hungry for acceptance, she found the perfect victim. But Studholm didn't work alone. She had assembled her own pack of predators, each bringing their own brand of cruelty to what would become a systematic campaign of torture. Lisa Richardson, 45, was Studholm's closest friend and partner in sadism. Neighbors described Richardson's flat as a hive of antisocial behavior. Visitors coming and going at all hours, fights erupting in stairwells, chaos that should have served as a warning to anyone who encountered her. She had a conviction for cultivating cannabis, but her real expertise was in cultivating cruelty. Then there was Sean Pendlebury, 26 years old and Studholm's former boyfriend. His criminal record read like a catalog of violence and lawlessness. Drug offenses, handling stolen goods, assaulting 2 police officers. But more than his crimes, it was his compliance that made him dangerous. He was, as the judge would later note, a follower rather than a leader, but a follower willing to participate in unspeakable acts of torture without question. Together, this trio formed what prosecutor Alison Hunter would describe as a pack of feral savages. But their savagery was not random. It was calculated, methodical, designed to break down their victim's spirit before destroying her body. The infiltration of Shakira's life began slowly, almost imperceptibly. Studholm started with friendship, introducing Shakira to her social circle, taking her out for drinks, making her feel included for perhaps the first time in years. But with each invitation came a price. With each drink came drugs, substances that would cloud Shakira's judgment and make her more malleable. With each social gathering came further isolation from her real family and friends. Like a spider weaving its web, Studholm gradually separated Shakira from everyone who truly cared about her, replacing genuine relationships with toxic dependence. And once Shakira was truly alone, truly isolated, truly dependent, the real horror could begin. Once Studholm had successfully isolated Shakira from her real family and friends, the true horror began to reveal itself. What had started as friendship quickly transformed into something far more sinister. A systematic campaign of control that would methodically strip away every aspect of Shakira's humanity. The financial takeover came first. With the calculated precision of a professional con artist, Studholm gradually assumed control of Shakira's income, her benefits, her bank accounts. Police would later discover paperwork hidden throughout Studholm's flat, documents showing she had complete control over every penny that should have belonged to Shakira. Some of these papers were concealed under mattresses, others stuffed into a bag that bore a chilling message. It wasn't me. But the financial control was just the beginning. The trio began treating Shakira as their personal slave, forcing her to wake in the early hours of the morning to 3-4 a.m. to clean their homes while they slept. She would stumble through the darkness, exhausted and confused, scrubbing floors and washing dishes for people who saw her as nothing more than property. The starvation began almost imperceptibly. While Studholm, Richardson, and Pendlebury ate proper meals, Shakira was given only sachets of ketchup, the kind you'd find at a fast food restaurant. These tiny packets became her primary source of nutrition as the trio watched her waste away, documenting her decline with the same casual cruelty they might show filming a dying animal. The physical transformation was horrific to witness. In early 2021, Shakira Spencer had been, as prosecutor Alison Hunter described her, a healthy, even voluptuous, size 16, weighing some 74 kilograms. But by July 2022, barely a year later, she was just skin and bone, gaunt and skeletal, bruised from head to foot, with hollowed black eyes. She was barely a scrawny size 6. The ultimate degradation came when they forced Shakira into prostitution, using her body as another source of income for themselves. Every aspect of her existence, her money, her time, her body, now belonged to them. She was made to sleep on newspapers spread across hallway floors like an unwanted pet, a broken woman in what had once been her own home. By August 2022, Shakira's condition had become so shocking that even strangers noticed. Police officers on patrol stopped her near Studholm's flat, deeply concerned about her appearance and demeanor. Here was their chance. Trained professionals recognizing that something was desperately wrong, but Shakira, so thoroughly broken and controlled by her tormentors, said nothing. She returned to her solitary hell, and with her went perhaps the last opportunity to save her life. To the trio, Shakira Spencer was no longer human. She was, in the words that prosecutor Alison Hunter would use to describe their mindset, viewed as less than human by these three wicked defendants. They had successfully reduced a loving mother, a woman with dreams and fears and hopes, into what they saw as a commodity, something to be used, abused, and discarded. The most damning evidence of their cruelty would later be found on their mobile phones. When police seized these devices after Shakira's death, they discovered hundreds of messages referencing the abuse they had subjected her to. But these weren't expressions of guilt or concern. They were celebrations of cruelty, documentation of torture, evidence that they took genuine pleasure in her suffering. Richardson and Studholm regularly exchanged photographs of a bedraggled Shakira, mocking her appearance, laughing at her degradation. They filmed videos of her being beaten, while they jeered and laughed in the background, treating her pain as entertainment. These recordings would prove essential in court, not just as evidence of their crimes, but as windows into the depths of their sadistic nature. The mobile phone evidence revealed the trio's complete lack of humanity. Voice notes captured their casual discussions about torture techniques. Text messages showed them planning new forms of humiliation. Most chilling of all were the images, photograph after photograph, documenting Shakira's steady deterioration, kept like trophies by people who found joy in another human being's destruction. What emerged from this digital evidence was a picture of systematic, deliberate evil. This wasn't a crime of passion or a moment of lost control. This was a months-long campaign of torture carried out by three people who documented their cruelty for their own twisted pleasure. The woman who had once dreamed of acceptance and friendship had found herself trapped in a nightmare beyond imagination. And the worst was yet to come. By early September 2022, Shakira Spencer had endured nearly a year of systematic torture, but her ordeal was about to reach its most horrific conclusion. The end began with a single text message that would later serve as evidence of premeditated murder. On a weekend that would forever haunt the quiet streets of West London, Studholm sent an urgent message to Richardson. "I bus her head. I need you here. I will go to jail." It wasn't a cry for help. It was a summons to complete the killing. Within hours, all three members of the sadistic trio had gathered at Studholm's flat in Harrow. What happened over that September weekend represents, in the words of the prosecution, a frenzied climax of torture that defies human comprehension. As we go into the most chilling details of this documentary, take a brief moment to like and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already, for more in-depth investigations and analysis of significant cases like this. The level of calculated cruelty they inflicted on Shakira during her final hours reveals the true depths of their evil. It began by pouring boiling water over her already broken body, watching as her skin blistered and burned. The screams that must have echoed through that flat were heard by no one who cared enough to intervene. Or perhaps the soundproofing of urban life simply swallowed her cries for mercy. But scalding wasn't enough for these monsters. They fashioned a makeshift blowtorch using a lighter and spray can, directing the flame directly at Shakira's face. The woman who had once smiled brightly in family photographs was now being deliberately disfigured by people she had trusted as friends. The flame seared her skin, leaving wounds that would later help investigators understand the systematic nature of her torture. The beating came next, blow after blow delivered with a heavy massager, the kind of device meant to bring relief from pain now being used to inflict the most excruciating agony imaginable. They targeted her head repeatedly, each strike bringing her closer to death, while the trio watched with what can only be described as sadistic pleasure. Perhaps most disturbing of all, they documented some of these final moments, even as they tortured a dying woman. Even as they committed acts that would horrify any decent human being, they continued their pattern of filming her suffering. These weren't crimes of passion. They were calculated acts of evil, performed by people who found entertainment in another human being's final moments of life. The assault continued over hours, possibly days. Shakira Spencer, who had once been a loving mother with hopes and dreams, was being systematically destroyed by the very people who had promised her friendship and acceptance. By September 12, 2022, Shakira Spencer lay dying at Studholme's flat in Harrow. Any decent human being would have called for an ambulance, rushed her to hospital, done anything to save a life that was slipping away. But decency had long since abandoned these three individuals. Instead of seeking help, they made a choice that reveals the absolute depths of their callousness. They chose murder. Studholme and Pendlebury bundled Shakira's unconscious, possibly already dying, body into the boot of their car, like a piece of unwanted furniture. The drive from Harrow to Ealing became a funeral procession for a woman who wasn't yet dead, transported by the very people who had destroyed her. When they arrived at Shakira's own flat, a witness would later testify to seeing something that haunts the imagination. Shakira falling as she was removed from the car, her body so broken that she could no longer support her own weight. This witness had no idea they were observing the final moments of a murder victim being delivered to her death. They dragged her inside her own home and locked her in a hallway cupboard, a space so small and dark it resembled a coffin. Later they would move her to the bottom of a children's bunk bed, perhaps recognizing that even they couldn't justify leaving a human being to die in a cupboard. But their concern wasn't for Shakira's comfort, it was for their own protection. As Shakira lay dying, possibly already dead, the trio began their cover-up operation. Using her own bank cards, they purchased cleaning supplies, methodically erasing evidence of their crimes from their homes, while her body began to decompose just miles away. For 2 weeks, as neighbors began to notice the smell and maggots started crawling from beneath her door, the three continued their normal lives. They went shopping, they socialized, they carried on as if they hadn't just committed one of the most prolonged and sadistic murders in recent British history. The woman who had once made her children feel happy, safe, and loved lay alone and forgotten, abandoned in death by the very people who had promised her friendship in life. September 25, 2022, 4:38 p.m. 2 weeks after Shakira Spencer had been locked in that hallway cupboard to die, the truth could no longer be hidden. The call to police came from a neighbor who had noticed something deeply disturbing: maggots. Hundreds of them, crawling from beneath Shakira's front door like a living warning of the horror that lay beyond. The smell, sweet, putrid, unmistakable, had been building for days, but it was those writhing insects that finally forced someone to act. When police officers forced entry into the flat on Holbeck Road in Ealing, nothing could have prepared them for what they found. The woman they discovered was so badly decomposed that she was barely recognizable as human. This had once been Shakira Spencer, loving mother, trusted friend, woman with dreams of a better life. Now she was reduced to remains that told a story of prolonged torture and abandonment. The state of decomposition was so severe that forensic pathologists couldn't determine an exact cause of death. But what they could identify painted a picture of systematic torture that shocked even experienced investigators. crushing injuries to her ear, deep cuts to her scalp, scalding wounds covering her feet, evidence of the boiling water and makeshift blowtorch that had been used on her during those final, horrific days. Her body showed the evidence of months of starvation and abuse. This was what remained of a woman who had been systematically destroyed by people she trusted, people she had considered friends. The breakthrough came just hours after the discovery, at 12:10 a.m. on September 26th. One of Sean Pendlebury's relatives made a phone call that would bring this reign of terror to an end. Pendlebury had confessed, told his uncle that he had been involved in killing a woman and that Ashana Studholm and Lisa Richardson were involved as well. Within hours, all three were arrested and taken into custody.
Am I Ashana? Yeah, I'm Ashana Studholm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Shana.
Your date of birth?
15/12/84.
84?
Yeah.
Okay, Shana, so I'm placing you under arrest on suspicion of murder.
Excuse me?
I'm currently placing you under arrest on suspicion of murder of Shakira Spencer on the 26th of September today. Necessitate your arrest to prevent further escape, secure evidence, as well as thorough investigation.
Hi, is it Lisa? Can we quickly come in? Okay, right, Lisa, just so you're aware. Okay, you're under arrest for murder. You don't have to say anything, but may harm your defence. If you do not mention when anything you do say may be given in evidence. Okay? You've been identified as someone involved in the murder of Shakira Spencer on the 25th. Okay?
You've been arrested on suspicion of the murder of Shakira Spencer at 9 Lambeth House, okay? Between the 31st of the 8th and the 26th of the 9th. In relation to that, you do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defence if you do not mention when questioned something which you later rely on in court. Anything you do say may be given in evidence. The necessity for your arrest is to prevent your disappearance, for a prompt and effective investigation, and for the prevention of harm, okay?
Yeah, but I've never did cocaine or anything with you, so I don't know why you're saying.
You're under caution at the moment. My advice would be, wait until you've had the opportunity to have legal advice before you make any further comment in relation to the allegations against you, okay?
But it was what police found on their mobile phones that truly sealed their fate and revealed the full scope of their depravity. Hundreds of messages detailed the abuse they had subjected Shakira to. Not expressions of remorse, but casual discussions of torture, planning sessions for new forms of humiliation. Richardson and Studholm had exchanged photographs of Shakira in her degraded state, mocking her appearance, treating her suffering as entertainment. Most damning of all were the videos. Recording after recording showed Shakira being beaten while her tormentors laughed and jeered in the background. These weren't crimes of passion, they were calculated acts of sadism, documented by the perpetrators themselves for their own twisted pleasure. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable, horrifying. Detective Chief Inspector Brian Howie would later describe the case as requiring the retrieval and viewing of thousands of hours of CCTV, extensive forensic examinations, pathology, witness accounts, all painting the same picture of systematic, sadistic murder. On December 11, 2023, after nearly 18 hours of deliberation, a jury at the Old Bailey found all three defendants guilty of murder and preventing lawful burial. The jurors were so traumatized by what they had heard and seen that the judge excused them from jury service for life due to the harrowing nature of the case. On March 1, 2024, Judge Angela Rafferty delivered their sentences. Life imprisonment with a minimum term of 34 years each. Her words rang through the courtroom with the weight of absolute moral judgment. This was marked by extreme, calculated, and brutal violence and torture. You have no remorse. Your only concern continues to be for yourselves. You may never be released. Ashana Studholm, Lisa Richardson, and Sean Pendlebury will not be eligible for parole until May 25, 2056. They will spend the majority of their remaining lives behind bars, paying for the calculated destruction of an innocent woman who wanted nothing more than friendship and acceptance. Shakira Spencer died alone, believing she was unloved, the cruelest lie of all. Her son, whose name cannot be spoken to protect his privacy, will carry forever the haunting words he spoke in court. I cannot get the horrible image of my mother looking skinny and unwell out of my head. Why were they so heartless? What could cause them to torture another human? Her mother, Mayor Shakira Spencer, described a family whose heart had been torn out. She was isolated from her family and friends, her health deteriorated, and she was almost unrecognizable. But perhaps the most chilling aspect of this case is how it happened in plain sight, in a quiet London suburb, behind a door, next to ordinary neighbors who had no idea that hell existed just meters away. Shakira's family said Shakira was a beautiful soul who cared deeply about people and loved spending time with her family and friends. A woman whose only crime was wanting to belong, wanting to be accepted, wanting to trust in human goodness. Today, Shakira's killers sit in prison cells where they will likely spend the rest of their lives. But for Shakira Spencer, the loving mother who simply wanted friendship, justice came too late. Her story reminds us that evil doesn't always announce itself with fanfare. Sometimes it knocks on your door wearing the mask of friendship, and by the time you realize the truth, the door has already closed behind you. If you enjoyed this content, join our community by subscribing and turning on notifications. Every subscriber makes it possible for us to keep creating content we're passionate about sharing with you.